If I had seen Jesus walking along with his 12 disciples, and I thought, man, these guys are the cream of the crop, and so I come up close to listen, and I hear James and John saying, who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom? Is it going to be me? Is it going to be you? Even
what do you think? Should we just blow that town up? They didn't take us very well. Yeah.
Yeah. Jesus, shall we call down fire from heaven? Yeah. Or you walk up close and you hear Judas on the phone talking to the chief priest, can you make that 30? Can you make that 30 pieces of silver? Sure. I'll turn him over. That has existed from the beginning, hasn't it? I mean, and it's a shame, but you know what? It exists in my life.
Well, hello and welcome to another classic but also contemporary episode of On the Journey with Matt and Ken. I'm Matt Swaim. He's Ken Hensley. We're going to talk all about his life.
That's right.
Just a couple episodes from now.
Soon.
We've been going into my life, digging out all kinds of things from the closets of my world. Talking a little bit about some of the reasons why I became Catholic, and today, some of the reasons that I had not the smoothest road in the world. But if you are someone who is interested in the church in any capacity, whether you're coming to it from scratch or whether you're thinking about coming back to it, please do contact us at the Coming Home Network. It's chnetwork.org. That's where you can find lots of resources and stories and all the previous episodes of On the Journey as well. But if you really want to dive into the conversations that we're having on a daily basis with people from all backgrounds and at all stages of interest in Catholicism, then please do come check out our online community, which is community.chnetwork.org. Ken, I know I've unloaded so much of my life story on you in the past two episodes. I can't believe that you're interested in hearing anything else after all that I've said.
Well, there's so much you have to say as introductory in every one of these episodes that my mind gets blown by the time you're done with ch./.this.that.
Just letters and numbers to you. I know.
By the way, subscribe to our subscribe.
Yes.
You know what that means.
Mash the button
and
subscribe to the YouTube channel.
Yeah. And I don't know whether you asked it or not, but I'm doing fine.
Ken,
I'm here and I'm ready to go. It's strange for me too to not be the one who is launching out with a bunch of content. And we've done about 77 episodes of On the Journey with Matt and Ken, and mainly we've been digging into pretty heavy and important fundamental theological issues and talking about the process of thought that led us from wherever we were to eventually become Catholic. And so I usually start these recordings with my mind is filled with content. And now I start this recording just like a blank slate, tabula rasa. I don't even know what you're saying. I don't know what you're going to say, and I don't know what I'm going to say in response. But here we are. And yes, we're listening to your story over the course of some weeks, the story of your trek into the Catholic faith. And you've told us in the last couple of episodes, you've told us what opened your heart opened your mind to the concept that Catholicism might have something to say. And you've gone through some of the things that led you to believe, to begin to strongly believe that you needed to become Catholic. And the question I want to throw at you today, you can come at it from any angle you want, though, is what about obstacles on the way? What are the obstacles that you faced theologically, personally, existentially, financially, whatever they may be? What are the obstacles you faced on this path? And so go ahead and take it wherever you want to. And
yeah, I figured I'd start today. I think we sort of left off last time around. I was fairly convinced that I needed to become Catholic. Mm-hmm. So the obstacles came in the forms of how is this supposed to work? What am I supposed to do? Without going into too much detail, there were obviously some things to deal with regarding my family and friends who, many of them, Catholicism was just not an option. Not necessarily because they were anti-Catholic, but because they didn't have a space in their brain to put the idea of someone actually actively on purpose becoming Catholic, in part because they weren't sure exactly what the Catholic Church was. Yeah. So,
well, and you're from Tennessee. You're from Tennessee.
And
you're
Kentucky.
From Kentucky. You're from the buckle of the Bible Belt. So most of the people in your family, I would assume, they open the file drawer and they just do not have a
it's empty.
file.
It's empty.
Yeah. For this subject.
Yeah. So there was that obstacle in terms of just like, this is just, terra incognito, as it were. Nobody knows what this is. And also with my friends, who I started the house church with, who I'm still good friends with, so many of them, and they just didn't. They couldn't follow me. They respected me. They were kind to me the whole time. It wasn't an option for them. And there wasn't like really, some major kind of like knockdown, drag out brawl or anything. There was nothing like that with any of my friends. It was just like all right, go do it, man. Whatever makes you happy, kind of thing.
So they weren't pulling Lorraine Bettner's book on you, or
no Trail of Blood stuff.
Talking about the Whore of Babylon. They weren't pulling that on you.
No.
No. Okay.
I mentioned in a previous episode that I did have some anti-Catholic stuff that was in the background, but most of that's been pretty well solved by this point. I had, especially when I was researching end times, things as a young kid, going through Revelation and Daniel. Some of the Protestant prognosticators I was, looking at had some anti-Catholic things to say about, the role that the Pope would play in the end of the world, and I was pretty well over that. I think really the first obstacles for me came, there are about 4 different categories I want to get into, but the first one was all the stuff that was wrapped up in experiencing the reality of the Catholic Church compared to what it had existed as in my mind as an ideal. And there are a couple of reasons I think that this was kind of difficult for me. One is because I hadn't known any Catholics growing up. 2 is because I didn't even have a concept in my head of what the lived reality of Catholicism was. I hadn't really talked to any Catholic friends over the years who were like, oh yeah, so Lent's coming up. Oh, this is what it's like. There's nothing like that in my life for me to have as a point of reference.
Yeah.
But also because my conversion towards the Catholic Church, my attraction to it happened primarily in my own head with the aid of books written by dead people. Right? So all the people I'm having conversations with Catholicism about right up to the very end, all my interlocutors are dead and have been so for some time. Right? So the G.K. Chestertons and the Flannery O'Connors of this world, the Ronald Knoxes, the J.R.R. Tolkien, they're all dead. They're dead, Ken. It's not like I can call them on the phone.
Chesterton, Flannery O'Connor.
They're all gone. They're in the communion of saints at this point. And that's all good and well, but I'm trying to figure out who I'm going to be sitting in the pews with, and so that was an issue for me. And as such, when I finally worked up the nerve to go to my first mass, which was within walking distance actually of the place where I'd been living in this kind of Christian punk rock commune of sorts, I actually was very nervous about going to my first mass for a few different reasons. I had no knowledge of this whole Vatican II thing or any of some of the liturgical brouhaha that goes on in the interwebs today.
Right.
I was worried when I went in there, okay, am I going to be underdressed in this room full of monks and nuns? Like, this is going to be strange. Will I know any of the Latin phrases that are going to be peppered throughout the course of this? Am I going to know what I'm supposed to do, sit, stand, kneel at various points? Am I going to have like an allergy to all the incense that's going to be in there? All these things are in my mind. And of course, when I walk in and I get the, as the record on my shelf indicates, I got the 20th century folk mass. So that's what,
No incense, no nuns, no monks.
No, none of the nun. None of the nun stuff.
No albino monks with knives.
Right. None of the Monty Python, whacking yourself in the forehead with book stuff that I was fully expecting to see. I was frankly a little underwhelmed and a little put off by my first experience of the Mass, because bear in mind, my whole life, my family had selected congregations based on Was it good music? Was it good preaching? Was there good, strong fellowship? And the music was a C minus. Preaching was maybe a D plus. It was about
strikes.
a tenth as long as I was used to hearing someone preach. It was very little connection to the actual scriptures that we had heard. I know some people, when they go to Mass for the first time, they're like, wow, there's so much Bible in this Mass. I wasn't keyed in on the liturgical pieces of it, so I didn't notice that part until later. I was wired to key in on the preaching.
The sermon. Yeah, the sermon.
And I was like, there's no Bible in this thing. Like, nobody's talking about the Bible. They're just telling me about how I shouldn't be nice to each other if somebody cuts me in line at the grocery store. I'm like, I already know that. And then at the end, I had walked in thinking they were going to be able to smell the Protestantism on me and that I was going to be confronted, you know, because every other church I'd ever gone to, when you're the new person in the room, somebody's there at the door being like, hey, are you new here? What's your name? Where are you from? You know, are you new in town? You know, it was none of that. And my wife had not yet moved to the Cincinnati area. And so I was kind of reporting back to her after a couple of weeks of this. And this is terrible.
Wait, was she your wife now?
Not yet. No.
Yeah. Okay. Okay. Yeah, because I was going to say last week you mentioned the girl you were getting to know, the young lady you were getting to know, who would later become your wife, who was a Catholic and who was beginning, in some way at least, to challenge you a little bit, but she wasn't a part of this, and you weren't talking to her.
I was corresponding with her. You were
talking with dead people, but you didn't see dead people. You saw her.
I did not see dead people.
Person.
Right. So she's living in D.C., finishing up her degree at Catholic University of America at the time. She would, in a short while, be moved out to Cincinnati to take master's classes in education. And so all of this was correspondence and phone calls. And I think I said to her on the phone at one point, I was like, Colleen, I think I like everything about Catholicism except the Mass. And she was like, yeah, that doesn't work.
She's like, that's the central thing.
Work. She's like, yeah, you gotta work on that.
So you're basically saying that
obstacle.
You're basically describing your first obstacle really was just what you had been reading, the impression you had gotten from what you've been reading, and then the reality when you walked in. At least at that time, that Mass, it was underwhelming.
Sure. You know, and I've experienced,
you're out.
Yeah, I've experienced a range of things since. I've experienced lots of the 20th century folk Mass. I've experienced the traditional Latin Mass. I've experienced, my personal favorite, which is a meaningless kind of thing to say about something when you're talking about the objectivity of the sacrament. But, you know, I love it when you've got the Novus Ordo Mass that is like got all the main pieces in Latin. You know, I've a range of things. I've been to Mass in other countries, right? And now I understand that the Mass is the Mass. But that was an adjustment for me because there was never any kind of, in the services, the church services I grew up, it was never just like, well, the church service is the church service. It doesn't matter how the homily goes or how the sermon goes. We didn't have the word homily. It doesn't matter what the singing's like. Right. It doesn't matter if anybody gets saved at the end of it, right? The church service is the church service. It has the same intrinsic power. Like, there was no concept of that, right? Where I came from. It was either a good or a bad experience of church based on like the felt reality of it. So that was a big adjustment for me. It was just kind of really getting my head around, you know, the reality of the Eucharist despite what was going on around it. That was hard. It was hard. And
it's the
I still get cranky about liturgical stuff, but you know, it's not the same kind of level of just like angst and anxiety that I used to have in regard to that sort of thing.
You know, when you think of it, Matt, though, the discrepancy between the ideal and then what you see in the flesh, you know, I mean, I can think about the Bible. Think of how the church is described by Jesus in Ephesians 5, where it's a spotless bride being presented to the Father. I mean, if you read that and you got your conception of the church from that, and then you walked into, you would have the same kind of jarring.
Well, in some ways,
anyway, go ahead.
You know, reading Paul's letter to the Ephesians helped me kind of understand that, because this was the same guy who wrote to the Galatians and said, "You stupid Galatians, what is wrong with you? Did you hear a single thing that I said when I was with you?" Right? Like, so I kind of understood, eventually it sort of soaked in that
Yeah.
even in the time of the apostles, you had Paul talking about a holy Catholic and apostolic church,
Right.
which is what the church intrinsically is, but the way that it actually kind of is being worked out in Galatia ain't so hot right now. So that helped me. But I think the other reality versus ideal thing that really bothered me, and it bothers me still, but it wasn't like a crushing anxiety. It's not a crushing anxiety now like it was then, and that is that I had read things like the radical combination of Orthodox theology, love for the sacraments, and implementation of Catholic social teaching in the life of somebody like Dorothy Day, or of Mother Teresa, or of John Paul II in the way that he taught, and of reading in the Catechism and seeing just strong Christology matched with strong commitment to the lived reality of Christianity and the works of mercy, and finding that unfortunately inside the church there were a lot of the same kind of divides in the American pews that there were out there in Republican and Democrat land and in cable news land, and feeling as though that there were some forces that said, no, you have to pick which pieces of the Catechism you're going to double down on and which pieces you can kind of push to the side. And it was also sort of a weird thing because where I came from, kind of conservative and liberal had sort of static meanings, and they were attached to political realities. But here in the Catholic Church, I was finding people who were politically conservative but liturgically liberal, right? or
the other way around.
Or sort of like a mix of things, like people who were like, hardcore Republicans in the voting booth, but we're into the 20th century folk mass when it came to the liturgy. It was just a very strange thing, a strange adjustment. And, I came in having read the Catechism and thought, I can't believe that there's a place that has all of these things. And then I walk into the local parish and I realized that, it's like Galatia and Ephesus and Thessalonica, it's a work in progress at the local level.
Yeah, or the church in Corinth, you're of Paul, you're of Apollos, you're saying I'm of Peter, divided.
I heard this
all
thing
that.
about this guy with his father's wife.
You know what, though? This isn't... What you're saying now, though, it just strikes me as being another version of your first point, really, and that is the disjuncture between the ideal that you read in Scripture, or now you're reading in the Catechism, or you're seeing in the lives of some of the saints, with what you get in the garden variety parish when you walk through the door. But it makes me but it reminds me that this goes all the way back. I'm just thinking, if I had seen Jesus walking along with his 12 disciples and I thought, man, these guys are the cream of the crop, and so I come up close to listen and I hear James and John saying, who's going to be the greatest in the kingdom? Is it going to be me? Is it going to be you?
What do you think? Should we just blow that town up? They didn't take us very well. Yeah.
Yeah. Jesus, shall we call down fire from heaven? Yeah. Or you walk up close and you hear Judas on the phone talking to the chief priest, can you make that 30? Can you make that 30 pieces of silver? Sure, I'll turn him over. That has existed from the beginning, hasn't it? I mean, and it's a shame, but you know what? It exists in my life. The ideal that I long for and the ideal that I strive for, and that at times in some little sliver of a way in my life, I think I'm approximating. And the reality,
I vacillate all the time between
climb into my brain. If someone were to climb into my brain and sit there for about a month, be privy to all the thoughts,
Gosh, it sure is empty in here.
But
no.
So,
but yeah,
So
as
mainly
I also
your
say,
problem so far. Yeah.
I was just going to say my theology is often, I feel like, fairly, where it needs to be. It's my own pursuit of holiness that needs to go back to remedial classes all the time, and so I can kind of get that, the thing that I was encountering. I'm like, oh yeah, that's in me, as you're saying.
Yeah, right. And I totally relate, because I thought my way into the Catholic Church too. So a lot of what I had in my mind was a vision that I had built up from reading theology, reading great books, reading the lives of great saints. So anyway, go ahead. Yeah,
I was just going to say the other thing that was sort of disconcerting to me is I was working in a secular environment at the time, but it was full of a bunch of people who had been Catholic but were no longer like participating in church. And this is like bubble. I'm so excited about this. I am like absolutely amped about the things that I'm learning and discovering, and the path that my life is now on after having been so disillusioned with all the Christian things that I'd been experiencing before. And now I finally found the pearl of great price, and it was, there are all these weird experiences around it. And, occasionally I would say something about what I was doing, and one of my coworkers was like, wait, you're becoming Catholic on purpose? Like, the church is lame. It's terrible. This priest did this. And people like actively discouraging me. Even some of the people I went to, some of the parishes I went to inquiring about becoming Catholic were just downright, did everything but try and talk me out of it. There were a couple of places that downright talked me out of it. And a couple other places are like, yeah, well, we don't have a DRE right now. Why don't you come back next fall? Or the one place that said, it's December right now. That's really cool that you're interested. I tell you what, come back next September, because next September we'll start a series of classes and you can participate. And I think this is shortly after I'd read the story of John Henry Newman waking up in the middle of the night and walking through the driving rain to the house of Dominic Barbarian saying, get the oils now before I change my mind, right? I'm like, this is kind of the image I have in my mind, and I'm like, what are you telling me? Come back next September. What is this? Is this the DMV? What? At any rate, I was confused. So that was an obstacle.
It's sort of like the I have this image in my mind. It's sort of like the Bible story where Matt Swaim wakes up in the morning and goes, behold, it's Leah.
That's kind of what it was. It's like, I thought I married Rachel. What's this? Here we go. Another 7 years of RCIA for me, right? But to get into kind of like the second main category of obstacle for me was, once I was in the process of becoming Catholic, it wasn't actually long before I got involved in the local Catholic radio station. And, of course, I had a radio background, and that's, what my college work had been in. And because of this, there was a lot of exposure to just, full blast fire hose, faithful Catholicism in the mix there too. And a lot of it, people would call up the radio station, or people would come into the radio station, or people would find out I worked for the radio station, and they would corner me. And they would tell me about like these things that Our Lady had said to this visionary. Or they would say something about like this novena that you have to pray, like that Our Lady told us that if you did this, then this would absolutely happen. A lot of kind of like sort of tit for tat Catholic pieties that, or like, the St. Gertrude prayer, where did you know that if you pray this, exactly 99 souls will spring from purgatory? That's not the numbers, but a lot of these things that were told to me, like I had to do this like insane list of pieties every day if I was supposed to be a good Catholic. Like, how is this possible? Like, there are not enough hours in the week for me to do all the holy hours that I'm apparently supposed to do in reparation for this thing and that thing, and Jerry Springer the musical coming downtown, we got to do a holy hour for that too. And like, abortion and, the denigration of marriage and, things that are going on in Washington. Like, I have to do a holy hour for every single one of those things. Are you kidding me? Like, I'm one man. And thinking,
so you're feeling like instead of getting into the public world, instead of getting into radio, you would have been happier if you could curl up in the corner with Chesterton and just remain there, huh?
Just be there, just fine.
Just reading and learning and keeping the doors closed and the windows shut.
Yeah, and also like not understanding which of those things, because I was getting hit from all sides, which of those things were approved,
are really taught, really taught and really important, and
or which of those things were, some of those things which were approved and deemed worthy of devotion, which of those things did I actually have to do, and which of those things could I set to the side and say, well, maybe this isn't the particular piety that Christ is calling me to kind of invest myself in. So like,
right.
When you're a brand new Catholic and you're like, so like, I want to say a Hail Mary right now, but should I be directing it at Our Lady of Lourdes, Our Lady of Fatima, or Our Lady of Guadalupe? Because what world evil am I trying to solve by praying this Hail Mary? Like, it could be it was an overwhelming thing for me. But also, too, I mean, that was the stuff that people were hitting me with. The stuff that I was imposing upon myself was this discovery of the spirituality of St. Francis de Sales and of St. Benedict and of Ignatius of Loyola and of St. Francis and of St. Dominic, and these, the Carmelite tradition, all these wonderful spiritualities. I know you're a big fan of Jose Maria Escrivá and his spirituality, and thinking, you mean I can't do all these? Like, I can't, which one's a fit for me? And as a result, I've actually never decided that, I was going to pursue being a lay Carmelite or a lay Dominican or any of those things, just because I found that, at least for me, different aspects of those different spiritualities have been extremely fruitful at various points in my life. But not every one of them hits me the same way every time. Like, sometimes I'm going through a Franciscan season in my life, or I'm going through like a Benedictine season in my life. And being able to recognize that, instead of just thinking I have to be a Jesuit and a Dominican and a Franciscan and a Salesian simultaneously, while also working in the Carmelites over my lunch break. Like, that was a struggle for me. I don't know if that was a problem for you, but I mean, you probably found Jose Maria Escrivá immediately. But.
No. I do what you do. I draw from everyone. I mean, St. Philip Neri is one of my great loves that I've learned a lot from, and St. John of the Cross and his writings, and then, of course, St. Teresa of Avila. So, no, I draw from all sorts of things. When it comes to St. Jose Maria Escrivá, it's mainly setting a practical pattern for life that I find very useful and very helpful. But anyway, okay, go ahead. Your story is so interesting to me to hear. And I don't know why you got
I'm glad
involved
my pain
in
is
radio so
entertaining to
quickly.
you, Ken. I'm glad that my pain is entertaining.
It's very the more painful, the more I laugh, the more entertaining. By the way, why were you in radio? What were you doing in radio, in Catholic radio?
Oh, yes. Yeah, so this is part of, my complaint to my wife was that I can't get anybody to say hello to me at the end of Mass. Like, nobody cares that I'm even here. And my wife said, well, you just got to get involved in something that you can, plug into and find community with. And she said, there's a local Catholic radio station. She actually, I think, made the call for me. And this is, I think, right after she had moved into town. And so I called Bill, the station manager at Sacred Heart Radio. And this is sort of a side story. And I was like, yeah, I, am coming into the church soon.
I'm a Catholic.
You're
not even Catholic yet.
Yeah, I don't think I was even Catholic yet. I'm trying to remember exactly the timeline.
Okay.
I'm coming into the church soon. Have a background in communications. I have a degree in communications with an emphasis on production. Radio is my personal, kind of area of formation. And Bill was so excited that someone had called that was because the radio station had only been going for a couple of years, that was proficient in the tools and mentality of radio production, and B, under the age of 80 years old and listening to his radio station, because he wasn't, like, really aware of like the demographics at that point, because it's a fairly new station. So they called me in and and fairly rapidly got me plugged in, doing some like just some hourly editing, and then it kind of escalated into the Sunrise morning show a few years later. But I did find a lot of community.
Can you get onto some more pain? Can you get onto some more pain
yes.
now?
More pain for you, Ken. I think a third out of the four areas that was a real struggle area for me was taking these doctrines that I'd read about and learning to kind of like walk around in them. The Mary stuff, I think I've hinted at, and we can talk a little bit about some of the doctrinal stuff. The doctrinal stuff with Mary was actually not that difficult. Once I began to put two and two together and understand how Mariology flowed forth from Christology. But I think still actively talking to Mary as if she's actually there and listening was a little weird for me. It's something I had to like, cultivate and needed a little practice for. I think too, the doctrinal reality of the Eucharist was like locked and loaded in here, but then walking up in the line to receive Jesus, or even preparing to receive Jesus in the Eucharist in RCIA, and watching everybody else, like they're standing in line at Kroger and like kind of half there and half not. I don't know what's going on internally, but this is what it looks like to me, right? I think was a struggle for me. Like, is this really you, Lord? And to this day, as I walk up the aisle, one of the things that I, pray is, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief, because I want to constantly be giving that over, just because I know and hear that it's real. And, this is something that I've kind of grown and matured in, but, you probably have gotten this question a lot too with people who are coming into the church, preparing for their first communion, often at the Easter Vigil. And they say, well, what did you feel the first time you received communion? What do you guys feel when you receive Jesus Christ, our Lord himself, body, blood, soul, and divinity? And frankly, I don't remember feeling anything in particular that first time. And I don't feel anything particular, I'd say about 80% of the time. And that was a struggle for me. But the fact of the matter is, Ken, is that about 20% of the time, I do feel something. 20% of the time, I do get kind of like that window into what's really actually happening, and it buckles my knees. It's the kind of thing where the objective and the subjective meet. Kind of always knowing that Christ was there, but realizing that I wasn't going to feel it every time was a struggle.
Totally relate. Yeah. And here's one thing I thought about that too. This is a place where Catholicism is so radically different from the forms of Protestantism, at least that I understood and that I lived in. I would go to church to hear a sermon, to learn. So I'm learning about God from the Word, and I'm praying and I'm singing praise. And then in my years as a pastor, I'm the one preaching it. But in the Catholic Church, you're asked to believe that a miracle is taking place right in front of your eyes.
That's a much bigger
every time
ask.
You go.
It's a much bigger ask.
Yeah, it's a bigger ask, A miracle is taking place right here, right now. It's much bigger. And so I thoroughly understand the Lord, I believe, help thou my unbelief. It's like you get your doctrine straight, your biblical theology, history, you get it locked into your mind. This is the reality, but then you have to look forward every week or every day and say, okay, a miracle's taking place. And the only thing I can feel too is, Lord, I believe, help my unbelief. That prayer is always on my lips. It's always in my
there's
mind.
Something.
Okay.
I'm trying to remember the W.H. Auden quote. He says something to the effect of, all the poets say, well, I will love you forever. He says, anybody can say that. That's an easy sentiment. What about I will love you next Tuesday at 4:30, right? And I think that was kind of like the thing that I was working through in my head, as a Catholic. Like, I believe now and forever that the Eucharist truly is body, blood, soul, and divinity, our Lord Jesus Christ. But what about like the third Sunday of the month? Do I believe that? And that was kind of what I was like learning to get my sea legs in, as far as that goes.
Okay.
You want the last one? I'll give you
I think we have enough time, depending on how much you want to expand on it.
I don't need to expand on this a ton, but I do feel like I have to mention it just because it is so common, and I want to say it really for the benefit of the people watching this who may be lifelong Catholics who say this kind of thing all the time, and I know what they mean, and they're right in a lot of ways. But I also know how I felt when it was said to me. So there was this thing that would happen to me, even when I was in RCIA, because I had read the Catechism through maybe twice before I became Catholic, plus Chesterton and Frank Sheed and 100 other people. And so I knew the answers. I knew the doctrinal stuff. I was on point with all these things. I was dialed in, locked in. And so I would mention these things around cradle Catholics who've been doing this their whole life and had never heard any of this stuff, especially once I got involved in Catholic radio, and they're like, oh, you guys, you converts are always so much better Catholics than us cradle Catholics. You guys are amazing. I can't believe how holy and faithful you are. I'm like, you don't know me. Like, you don't know what it's like in here and in my heart. Like, I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. Like, do you understand that? Like, I don't know what I'm doing. I know what's true, but I don't know how to do it. I don't know where I am. Some of these modern buildings, I don't even know what door to go into when I show up at a church that I've not been to. I don't know what I'm doing. Don't put me on some kind of pedestal. Like, literally, I'm watching you people who claim that you don't know anything. I'm watching you guys to know when to sit up and sit down and stand up. That's how lost I am.
Let me zero in here then. Are you saying, in terms of the obstacle, are you saying that the obstacle was finding out how dumb the Catholics were to think you were that holy?
How gullible they were to think that I was smart?
The realization, or the realization that you weren't what you needed to be. What are you're saying the first, aren't you?
Well, I'm saying a couple things here, but one of them is that I think that cradle Catholics can be under the illusion that because a lot of converts have studied the material, that makes them good Catholics. And in fact, that's a false sense of security for a convert, because this is one of the reasons that when we have somebody on the journey home, we wait until they've been Catholic a couple of years if we can.
And so unlike you who was on Catholic radio before you even became Catholic, now you want people to wait a couple of years before they come on their journey home and tell their story. But anyway,
I mean,
so
I wasn't
thought it was strange.
On Catholic radio at that point. I was editing stuff in the middle of the night, but still,
so you viewed this as an obstacle that Catholics thought that you were, or assumed that you were something great. That was another obstacle.
And I don't want to say it was an obstacle to me becoming Catholic, but it was something that made it, I don't know, I felt like I felt like everybody kind of expected me to be a model of Catholicism, when in fact I was a very green Catholic, right? I was very wet behind the ears. I was a rookie in every way. And so I think one of the early struggles for me was that me being like, I need help. Who's going to tell me how this works? And people were coming to me and saying, can you help us? I'm like, how am I supposed to help you? Why? Because I've read more Chesterton than you? You think that I know what's going on? I have no idea. I just learned who my own bishop is.
You know what? I have to say in defense of these people, the people you're describing, because I experienced the same thing.
Oh, it was all well-intentioned, and I don't take it the wrong way now. But.
My experience is that many of them that said those kinds of things to me are way holier than I am, and love the Lord more than I did.
Oh my gosh, yes.
It's just that they weren't used to, they weren't formed intellectually in the same way. They weren't used to someone who had read a ton of stuff and knew a lot of things that they just hadn't put together in that way, And so they would say that, they act like you're a great star. And they want to put you on the podium, get you teaching and speaking right away and all that. Yeah. And they're better people.
Right. And I wasn't ready to go out and share publicly what had happened to me. But again, I think it goes back to one other thing, just, to put this out here as we wrap up, is it goes to kind of like a core difference in the way that Protestants make new Protestants versus how Catholics make new Catholics. Traditionally speaking, at least in the pre-Vatican II era, really in the pre-World War II era, when things were more aligned by cultures and national identities, the way that Catholics made more Catholics was by having babies, right? Whereas traditionally Protestantism has always been, you make more Protestants by going and preaching the gospel, discipling somebody, sending them back out, and then having them preach the gospel. So for us, it was natural for us to get you saved, get you a Bible, get you reading, get you turning around, and get you sharing that out in the world. And so Catholics aren't used to seeing that. So when they see a Protestant who comes in and decides they're going to do the same thing with Catholicism that they're used to having had done,
right,
as a lifelong Protestant, which is get in, learn it, go out, share it. They're like, wow, you guys must be, let's make you the CEO of this parish. No, I know nothing. So that was a struggle at first. And now I kind of think of it in a good-natured way, but I do know people who feel like a weird pressure, they come into the church, or they come towards the church, and suddenly people are telling them that they're some saint and scholar, and they're they've never even had their first confession yet.
Well, I'm spending a lot of time holding back here because I know that when we're done with your story, we're going to turn the tables and I'll have my chance to tell my story. But I relate to virtually everything you're saying. I relate and have my own, story to tell about that. But listen, then we should begin to wrap up for this week. And this means that when we get together next week to record, we're going to pick up where you're at. And I just want to hear the story as it goes forward. And that is basically, I think we'll be addressing the question, well, how did you make a home for yourself within the church? What was the process? How did it work for you? Something like that.
Yeah.
Okay?
Should be fun. Yeah, after I've thrown out all these problems and issues over the past 3 episodes, we can talk about like how now I have no problems at all. So it'll be a wonderful, very peaceful
that's
episode.
Right.
You won't have any fun because I won't be sharing any pain, Ken. I know how much you are entertained by my pain.
I'll find a way to hurt you. I'll find a way to hurt you.
I hope you're having some fun. We're certainly having fun with this series. It's On the Journey. I'm Matt Swaim along with my colleague Ken Hensley, and I encourage you to check out other episodes in this series. Some of the previous series deal more with like kind of the doctrinal stuff that I dealt with on my way into the church. This series has been more about kind of like the personal stuff. But if you are on your own personal journey and experiencing any of these things, then please do come visit us, especially in our online community, which is community.chnetwork.org. There's a whole bunch of people in there who have had all kinds of different experiences and are ready to welcome you with open arms and share them with you. And if you enjoy this series and want us to keep doing it long enough for Ken to share his side, then please do consider generously contributing to the financial well-being.
Are you insinuating
of
that I'm
this.
about to die or something?
I'm insinuating that
I'm on my way out.
maybe the batteries in this thing are about to die. I don't know. But you can just go to chnetwork.org/donate if you want to be a supporter of the work. Ken, thank you again.
All right, man. It's good seeing you again this week, and stay alive. Try and at least think up some more painful things to share next week so that I can have joy in my life.
I will do my best.
There, okay.
I will do my best. Until next week. Take care.
See you, Matt. Bye.